Hello guys, welcome to another video What It Takes to Be a Monarch, DaL X Fate, by PixyTokisaki14. Chapter 17. Servant Pav Artoria Pendragon. After that whole fiasco of command seals suddenly appearing on my hand, I took a seat while Morgan and Mordred were looking at my palm. Father, could you just use the command seals to teleport your servant here? Morgan asked as she held her chin. That would be a waste of a command seal. Plus we don't know which heroic spirit it is, I answered while looking at my palm. It seems that the seal took their time manifesting in this world. Is either that or an unknown reason. Artoria, think I may have a clue who is your servant, Morgan said as she leaned closer to my ear to whisper something. Maybe it's related to Arthurian legend. I mean that would make sense because me and Mordred are here. After she pulled back from whispering to my ear, I held my chin in a thought. I guess it would make sense. It would follow the theme of people getting summoned to Arthurian legend. Think. Who are more people that are involved in the legend? Probably the Knights of the Round Table and Merlin. But if it's just fate itself, it would include Emilia, Medea, Medusa, Heracles, Ku, and even. I shiver a bit at the thought. Gilgamesh. God, I hate that guy when I watched the anime. Now that I'm Artoria herself, instead of just hating him, it's just going to feel awkward and weird. I shiver a bit at the thought. Maybe all of us can look for said servant. Yeah, it should be easy since servants usually wear very flashy outfits. Okay, here's what we'll do, I announced as Mordred and Morgan turned their heads to face me. We'll go look for it. Morgan, you take the suburbs. Mordred, go look for it in the city. Be sure to check the rooftops. I'll take the woods. Remember, if you find anyone or anything that will help us track it down, be sure contact any of us. Morgan and Mordred nodded their heads as they transformed into their heroic spirit outfits, armor. I kinda forgot I taught my sister how to transform into her heroic spirit form. I also taught her how to fight when Mordred was at school so she won't be suspicious. I nodded and transformed into my armor and we all went invisible. After that we exited the building and went our separate directions. Mordred to the city, Morgan staying near the suburbs and me running towards the forest nearby. After about 4 hours of searching, I still haven't found anything, or anyone. I contacted Mordred and Morgan, but they're also empty-handed. Where is it? I said to myself, a bit frustrated because I can't find any traces of it. As I ran around the forest looking for signs of the servant, I was almost going to call it quits and go back home. Until I heard something in the bushes. I went out of my spirit form with Excalibur in hand as I stared down where the noise came from. Who is there? Show yourself, I shouted and waited for a reply. From the bushes came a robed figure. The robe was snow-white hood with golden edges. The figure looked to be feminine with her white dress and black thigh-high stockings. On the inside part of her hood had a mixture of golden, purple and pink colorings all swirled like a galaxy millions of kilometers away. She was holding a pearl-white stave that had a blue gem or something on the edge that was upright. She then lowered her hood to reveal long messy white hair that dropped down to her legs. Then it hit me. Prototype Merlin. The version of Merlin from the original Arthurian legend, but in that timeline instead of Arthur, who was a girl, Merlin was the one that got genderbent. That sword. My thoughts got interrupted as a soft voice came from her. Oh right. The Arthur is indeed a man in her timeline. How am I going to explain this? Well, if she's here, I guess she's my servant? Oh. If you are thinking about it, then it is indeed Excalibur, I answered as she showed a confused expression on her face. But you're not him. You're a woman. Only he can wield Excalibur. Who are you? She continued as she set her gaze on my silver armor. I sighed before taking a deep breath. My name is Artoria Pendragon, the king of Camelot and wielder of Excalibur, I answered, and as I finished her confused expressing turned into shock. Impossible. I know Arthur was never a girl. Much less a pretty-looking one, she said as she murmured the last part which I still heard. I think I can explain, I said as she walked up towards me to listen to my explanation. I then explained to her the different timelines we were in. How I was a girl in my timeline while my Merlin was a guy. I see then. That would explain a lot. How have his sword, she said in an understanding tone. That's not all, I said as I slowly removed my gauntlet to reveal to her my command seals. Oh, so you're my master, then I will properly introduce myself. She then entered a pose as she was introducing herself. Greetings, master. I am the mage of flowers herself, Merlin, at your service. I have to admit, the pose was a bit much, but it's still cute how she did it. I nodded as I contacted Mordred and Morgan. Once I finished the call, I motioned to Merlin to come follow me. While we were walking back, she keeps talking about things like, how does the male version of me look like? Or sometimes I took a glance at her and she was blushing under her breath, saying things like, I hope I get to meet him. I just ignored those comments since I've played through Arcade, as well as read her wiki. Hard to believe her species has succubus in it. I guess that would explain why she's horny about her male self. After a couple of minutes of walking, while ignoring the thirsty comments of a certain wizard, we reached the apartment where we were staying. It was late at night, so no one saw us come in the apartment while in our heroic spirit clothes. Father, you're back, Mordred said as Morgan turned her attention from the book she was reading. As I stepped inside, their gazes flowed to the person behind me. Merlin just widened her eyes at the sight of Mordred and Morgan, the latter having a confused expression splattered on their faces. I have to explain then. Mordred, Morgan. This is Merlin, my servant, I said as their gazes turned from shock into surprise. That's impossible. Merlin is a guy, Mordred exclaimed as she pointed at the wizard. The latter still has a shocked expression. Artoria, I hope there's an explanation to all of this, Morgan said as she stared down the wizard. I sighed as I motioned for Merlin to sit down at the seat facing the two. I then sat down beside Mordred and Morgan and started explaining why there was a female Merlin. So you're telling me that she's from a different timeline? Mordred repeated my explanation and I nodded. And in that timeline you were a guy? Morgan continued. I nodded again to her question. Master, I know it's weird to ask, but what is Mordred doing here? And Morgan as well? She asked as she looked at the two. I took another sigh and explained our situation. I see, do you really forgive your father, Mordred? She asked the blonde-haired knight. Mordred gave a soft smile, which is very rare for a tomboy like her. Yes, I have forgiven her, she replied. That's good then, Merlin added as she started smiling. While they were chatting with each other, I held my chin deep in thought. If she really was the prototype Merlin from that timeline, this could prove to be bad since she is really horny about boys. I cannot let her meet Shido at any cost. It's not like I fear that Shido will try to date Merlin. No, it's Shido I'm worried about. I snapped my head as we gazed at the clock. It seems like the chatter between the three of them took a while as I was deep in thought. It was already time for Mordred to go to school. If I'm correct, we're at the origami route. If I can restrain inverse origami, then maybe Shido will have an opening to seal her. It's worth a try. I then turned to face Merlin and she looked closely at my face. Merlin, can you go turn into your spirit form so I can't waste mana? I said as she nodded. Of course, my king, she said as she disappeared but was still there, just invisible. I nodded and turned to Mordred and Morgan and motioned to the clock. Mordred, you better get ready for school. Morgan, I have something to say to you after Mordred leaves, I said as the two nodded and Morgan went to the kitchen to prepare the food, while Mordred went to the bathroom to bathe. After a while, Mordred came out in her school uniform and sat at the dining table. After a short while, Morgan came out with our breakfast and we ate. We didn't need to eat after all, but it just feels good to eat, and I think Mordred agrees. After Mordred said her goodbyes and left the apartment, I was left alone with Morgan and Merlin. The latter was in her spirit form. I then turned my face towards Morgan and said, I think it's time we bump up your training. Now we have Merlin to help out with you spellcasting, I said, but I forgot something. I thought Morgan was already a powerful enchantress, Merlin commented, confused. I need to think of a quick excuse now. Ah well. Morgan lost her memories when she appeared in this world, so she couldn't remember anything in the past. I was there to help her out, but she also forgot how to cast, I explained. I see then, that would explain why she's friendly towards you, she added as I silently breathed a sigh of relief. I then went out of our apartment followed by Morgan and Merlin. The latter was still in her spirit form. I locked the door as we headed out towards the forest where no one should see us. Pavkatori Itsuka. I was on the Fraxinus when I suddenly felt a pain in my stomach. Commander, are you all right? Questioned Rain as she noticed me holding my stomach. No, it's nothing bad, I replied while going back to my post. Rain shrugged as she also returned to her post. Why'd I have a strange feeling I'm going to have another headache? Mordred Pendragon. I stared bored at the teacher while she was teaching us some things that I don't really care about. I then took a look around and noticed that origami wasn't here. I kept it to myself until the bell rang that signified that it was time for lunch. Like usual, Shido was sat beside Toka with origami nowhere to be seen. I then approached the two as they noticed me. Hey Shido, have you seen origami lately? I asked as Shido shook his head along with Toka. This is very strange, origami never misses a day in class, said Shido as he held his chin in thought. I'll help you look for her late then, I announced as Shido nodded. Thank you for your help, Shido replied. I nodded and went back to my seat. This could be important. I need to report this to father when I get back.